Luger P08, officially Pistola Model 1908, traces its lineage to Georg Luger's refinement of the Borchardt C93. Variants include the naval Pistola 04 and the long-barreled longer Pistola 08. Troops and collectors commonly used Luger or Parabellum. It served primarily as a semi-automatic officer's sidearm and as a specialist weapon, with the LP08 filling a stocked long-barrel role for artillery and aircrew in earlier decades. The pistol uses a toggle-locked short recoil action. Barrel and toggle move together briefly. The toggle cams upward to unlock, extracting and ejecting before the spring returns the assembly to battery. An 8-round detachable magazine feeds the gun. The mechanism rewards precise fitting, yet depends on correct spring rates and adequate ammunition pressure. Chamberings span 9 by 19 mm Parabellum and earlier 7.65 by 21 mm. Muzzle velocity in 9 mm from the standard short barrel sits in the 350 to 400 meters per second range, and practical pistol distances remain short. Accuracy and natural pointing were frequently noted, while sensitivity to weak loads could cause stoppages. Production stretched from 1900 to the post-war era at DWM, Mauser, Simpson, Krieghoff, and others, with millions manufactured across military and commercial runs. Wartime efforts phased it down as the Walther P38 proved faster to build, though existing stocks and captured guns kept the type in circulation. Soldier experience praised ergonomics and accuracy. Field mixing of non-matched parts could compromise reliability. The LP08's drum and stock experiments anticipated stormtrooper rules in the First World War and left a well-documented imprint on the weapon's reputation. MP40. Maschinenpistole 40, commonly MP40, descends from the MP36 and MP38. It served as a submachine gun for close-quarters fighting and was issued widely to NCOs, squad leaders, vehicle crews, and paratroops. Allied troops often misnamed it the Schmeisser, despite Heinrich Vollmer's development path and Hugo Schmeisser's lack of authorship for the design. The MP40 is an open-bolt, straight blowback gun with a 251 mm barrel and a folding metal stock. A 25-round double-column, single-feed magazine supplies ammunition. This geometry eases manufacturing, but increases friction and sensitivity to dirt or denting. Stamped steel and electro-spot welding replaced many machined parts from the MP38, and a telescoping guide acts as a pneumatic buffer. It fires 9 by 19 mm at roughly 500 to 550 rounds per minute, with effective use at 100 to 200 meters. The controllable rate of fire allowed disciplined single shots, and the compact folded profile suited mechanized and airborne formations. Irma, Starr-Mannlicher, and other firms produced the weapon from 1940 to 1945, with an estimated total around 1.1 million. Late-war simplifications appeared, along with trial concepts such as the dual-magazine MP41 and the MP41 hybrid that mated an MP40 upper to a different lower. Troops appreciated balance and handling, yet manuals cautioned against using the magazine as a foregrip to prevent induced malfunctions. Experience in urban fighting and exposure to Soviet massed SMGs encouraged issuing greater numbers to assault elements later in the war. Post-war service by many nations and irregular forces prolonged its visibility far beyond 1945.
Karabiner 98K.
Karabiner 89CK, or Kar 98 Kurz, became the standard German infantry rifle in 1935. It condensed the Gewehr 98 lineage into a handier service carbine while retaining the full-power 7.92 by 57 mm cartridge. Primary roles included general infantry service, sniper employment with optics, and launching rifle grenades with the Schießbecher Cup. Mechanically, it uses the Mauser M98 controlled feed bolt with a large non-rotating extractor and 3 locking lugs. The 5-round internal magazine feeds via stripper clips or single loading. The turned-down bolt handle aids operation and scope clearance, and the action's safety features earned broad trust among soldiers and later civilians. Standard heavy ball ammunition yields muzzle velocities around 760 meters per second and effective iron sight employment to about 500 meters. Optical equipment extends practical reach. The rifle's weight and balance supported steadiness, though its manual operation limited volume of fire relative to later semi-automatics. Production from 1934 to 1945 involved Mauser Oberndorf, Irma, Sauer, Gustloff, Steyer, Brunn, and others, surpassing 14.6 million rifles. Late Kriegsmodell changes accelerated throughput by deleting or simplifying parts and moving to phosphate finishes. Field reports across every theater describe the action as rugged in mud, cold, and dust, with laminated stocks adopted for stability from 1937 onward. Scoped variants using ZF-41 and other optics gave designated marksmen and snipers a dependable if bolt-driven platform. Post-war, reworks and derivatives spread globally, and the basic M98 system remained a benchmark for bolt-action design. MG-42. Maschinengewehr 42 entered service to reduce cost and time compared with the MG-34, while increasing battlefield effect. It functioned as a true general-purpose machine gun operating from bipods, tripods, vehicle mounts, and anti-aircraft fittings. German squad doctrine centered around the gun's output, with riflemen supporting and feeding the crew. The action is recoil-operated with roller locking and open bolt firing. It is belt-fed and uses a quick-change barrel system. Nominal cyclic rate around 1,200 rounds per minute, adjustable with bolt weights and springs, produced the recognizable buzzsaw report. The Lafette 42 tripod enabled buffered mounting, optical sights, and a mechanical walking fire mechanism to sweep a beaten zone. It fires 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser with iron sights graduated to 2,000 meters, though practical suppression occurs at much shorter ranges. The system's high rate creates intense short-exposure lethality, balanced by rapid barrel heating and substantial ammunition consumption. Multiple factories produced the MG-42 from 1942 to 1945, with totals around 423,600. Stamped and pressed construction reduced man-hours roughly by half compared with the MG-34. Early timing and bolt bounce sensitivities were addressed with component and ammunition refinements. Units adopted careful barrel rotation and ammunition discipline to manage heat and logistics. The type influenced post-war GPMGs directly. Evolution into the MG3 kept the core geometry in service for decades, while other nations adopted near copies or incorporated its feed and trigger concepts.
Flammenwerfer 41. Flammenwerfer 41 replaced the heavier Flammenwerfer 35 and became the standard man-portable flamethrower in 1941. The weapon functioned as a short-range incendiary tool for clearing bunkers, trenches, and fortified urban interiors, concentrating destructive effect where small arms fire could not. A backpack carried separate tanks for fuel and propellant gas, connected to a handheld lance. Early ignition relied on a hydrogen torch. Later production substituted a cartridge-based igniter to resolve severe cold weather failures encountered during the winter campaign in the East. The system used nitrogen to pressurize and propel the fuel stream. Fuel was a tar-gasoline mixture identified as Flam Oil 19, with about 11.8 liters carried. Effective range averaged roughly 32 meters. The lighter weight compared to the 1935 model improved maneuverability for assault teams. Manufacture ran from 1942 to April 1945, with approximately 64,000 units produced. Operational accounts noted greater reliability than the earlier model once the ignition change was implemented. Its niche remained specific and hazardous, requiring careful coordination and cover from supporting elements. After the war, doctrinal interest in man-portable flamethrowers declined, and later forces did not reinstate similar systems. Imagery from urban uprisings and late-war street fighting often shows the FMW-41 in the role for which it was designed. STG-44. The Sturmgewehr 44 began as the MKB-42H and MKB-42W carbine programs and moved through MP-43 and MP-44 designations before formal reclassification. The goal was clear: put controllable automatic fire and practical mid-range accuracy into each rifleman's hands using an intermediate cartridge shaped by experience on the Eastern Front. The rifle uses a gas-operated long-stroke piston with a tilting bolt and a 30-round detachable magazine. A straight-line stock layout reduces muzzle rise in automatic fire. The mechanism offers selective fire, and period guidance often recommended loading magazines to 25 rounds to preserve spring life. Its cartridge, 7.92 by 33 mm Kurtz, yields muzzle velocities near 685 meters per second from the standard barrel. Effective use centers around 300 meters in automatic and up to roughly 600 meters in semi-automatic fire. The firing cycle runs around 500 to 600 rounds per minute, a rate that balances control and output. Production from 1943 to 1945 involved C.G. Hanel, Josef Paul Sauer and Son, Erfurt, and Steyr Daimler Puch, totaling approximately 425,977 rifles across variants. Late-war quality variation reflected industrial strain. In the field, the rifle enhanced short to medium-range firepower without entirely displacing the Kar 98K's long-range utility or grenade launching. Experimental attachments such as the Krumluff curved barrel and the early IR Vampire night sight illustrate the program's breadth, though these remained limited. Subsequent generations of intermediate cartridge rifles drew heavily on the concept validated by its deployment.
Gewehr 43. Walter's G43, later stamped K43 in some production, answered shortcomings in the earlier G41 series by adopting a short-stroke gas piston and a flapper locking system informed by study of the Soviet SVT-40. The aim was a semi-automatic rifle that kept working with wartime ammunition and field conditions while reducing weight and complexity. The rifle feeds from a detachable 10-round magazine, yet can accept stripper clips in emergencies. Controls and layout support rapid follow-up shots compared to bolt actions, and sniper or designated marksman configurations used the ZF4 optic. The chambering remains 7.92 by 57 millimeters. Published velocities fall in the mid-700 meters per second range, with iron sight use typical to about 500 meters and scoped fire reaching beyond. Production from 1943 to 1945 reached roughly 402,713 rifles and involved Walter, Berlin-Lübecker, and Wilhelm Gustloff. Stamped parts and varying finishes reflected late-war realities. Reports indicate better reliability than the G41 family, with a gas system intentionally tolerant of dirty propellant and fouling. Modern users often tune systems to avoid overgassing with contemporary loads. Plans for broad platoon-level distribution fell short due to supply constraints, though thousands of scoped rifles entered service. Some late experimental conversions explored 7.92 by 33 mm compatibility, and a Mauser roller-locked prototype connected to the same line of development never proceeded to adoption. FG-42. Fallschirmjäger Gewehr Karabiner 42 arose from the Luftwaffe's requirement after Crete to land paratroopers with rifle-class firepower immediately available. Louis Stage at Rheinmetall led the design, with production concentrated at Heinrich Krieghoff and very limited numbers elsewhere. The weapon set out to collapse multiple rolls into a compact automatic rifle suited to air assault operations. Mechanically, it is a gas-operated system with a rotating bolt and a straight-line stock layout. It fires from a closed bolt in semi-automatic to enhance precision, and from an open bolt in automatic to manage heat. Magazines of 10 or 20 rounds mount on the left side, and the receiver carries an integral dovetail for optics. Later iterations moved the bipod forward, revised the muzzle device, and incorporated a 4-position gas regulator. Chambered in 7.92 by 57 millimeters, it offers accurate semi-automatic fire. Automatic bursts remain challenging despite muzzle compensation due to cartridge energy and weight. Practical cyclic rates for automatic fire were reduced in later versions to improve handling. Approximately 7,000 rifles were produced from 1943 to 1945. Material substitutions and shifts from forged to stamped receivers marked the evolution under wartime pressure. The type saw notable service with Fallschirmjäger on the Western Front after D-Day, including Kärnten and the Falaise fighting, with a concentration in the 2nd Parachute Division. Features of the FG-42 influenced post-war development. The U.S. M60's heritage reflects study of both the FG-42 and the MG-42.
Panzerfaust. Panzerfaust, developed from the Faust Patron program as a disposable, recoilless launcher to arm ordinary infantry and militia with credible anti-tank capability at short range. The tube came preloaded with a fin-stabilized heat warhead on a wooden shaft, fired by a simple lever and aimed with a leaf sight. The recoilless principle produced a hazardous rear blast demanding careful positioning. Variants scaled effective range and velocity. Early Faust-Patron and Panzerfaust 30 models offered short engagement distances. Panzerfaust 60 and 100 increased reach. Panzerfaust 150 introduced a redesigned warhead and two-stage propellant with claimed penetration increases. An envisioned Panzerfaust 250 would have been reloadable with a pistol grip but did not enter production. Warheads provided armor defeat sufficient for most contemporary tanks when struck properly, though low projectile speed extended time of flight and demanded close ambush positions. Operators confronted severe risk but gained decisive capability in urban terrain and restricted approaches. Production ran from 1942 through the end of the war, with totals across all variants exceeding 8 million units. Distribution widened as the conflict progressed, reaching Volkssturm and youth formations along with frontline units. The weapon altered infantry anti-armor tactics, forcing opposing armor to coordinate tightly with dismounts and to improvise standoff screens. Contemporary bazookas and the German Panzerschreck offered greater range with reusable tubes, yet the Panzerfaust's simplicity and warhead size gave it a distinct niche. Post-war, multiple nations produced direct copies and evolutions, and the single-use launcher concept persisted into modern designs. MG-15. The MG-15 began as a flexible aircraft gun in the early 1930s and later transitioned to ground service as airframes received newer belt-fed mounts. The conversion programs repurposed a large pool of existing guns, providing infantry with a high-rate support option when purpose-built ground systems were short. It is a recoil-operated open-bolt design using a rotating lock ring. The most recognizable feature is the 75-round saddle double drum straddling the receiver, feeding a central presentation. Cyclic rate sits around 1,000 to 1,050 rounds per minute, which empties a drum in a matter of seconds. In aircraft service, crews typically carried many spare magazines. On the ground, the feed system limited sustained bursts compared with belt-fed guns. The cartridge remains 7.92 by 57 mm Carans, delivering familiar ballistics. For ground conversion, mounts, sights, and accessories adapted the package to infantry employment, while the core mechanism stayed largely unchanged. By January 1944, official records cite about 17,648 ground conversions, with the true number plausibly higher. In use, the gun offered immediate volume of fire for brief suppressive tasks and defensive positions, but logistical burden and rapid magazine depletion constrained longer engagements. Licensing in Japan produced the Type 98 for the Army and Type 1 for the Navy, and period photos document installation across a variety of aircraft. Post-war sightings continued where stocks remained. The MG-15's trajectory from aircraft to ground reflects a wartime habit of reallocating specialized weapons to fill emergent infantry gaps. Really appreciate you watching. It means a lot to have your time and interest here. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with other firearm enthusiasts who'd like this kind of content. And if you've got a topic you'd like covered next, feel free to drop it in the comments. We read every single one of them. Thanks for tuning in.